If he hadn't been to Fulu Street or Tawai Lane, Chen Ping'an might not have realized the darkness and narrowness of the mud bottle lane in his life. Book equals has asterisk 0 small, said Plasnet. But instead of feeling lost, the straw sandal boy finally felt at ease. The boy smiled and stretched out his hands, just as his palms touched the yellow mud walls on both sides. I remember that about 3 or 4 years ago, Chen Ping'an could only touch the mud walls with his fingertips. When I went to my house, I found that the courtyard was wide open. The young man who thought he had been robbed ran into the yard. As a result, I saw a tall young man sitting on the threshold, leaning against the locked door and yawning bored. When I saw Chen Ping'an, I stood up with a burning eyes, ran to Chen Ping'an, clenched Chen Ping'an's arm, pulled it hard towards the house, and said in a low voice, "Open the door quickly. I have something important to tell you." Chen Ping'an couldn't get rid of this guy's bondage. He had to pull him to open the door. A strong boy 2 years older than him soon fell open. Chen Ping'an crept onto Chen Ping'an's wooden bed, stuck his ears to the wall and listened to the foot of the wall next door. Chen Ping'an asked curiously, "Liu Xiaonyang, what are you doing?" The tall boy turned a deaf ear to Chen Ping'an's questions. After about half an instant, Liu Xiaonyang returned to normal and sat on the edge of the wooden bed. His face was complex, both relieved and regretful. At this time, Liu Xiaonyang found that Chen Ping'an was doing a strange activity. He squatted in the door, leaned outward, burned a piece of yellow paper with a candle the size of his thumb, and the ashes fell outside the threshold. That it seems that Chen Ping'an is still talking, but he is a little far away. Liu Xiaonyang can't really hear it. Liu Xiaonyang is the disciple of Old Yao in an old and famous dragon kill. As for Chen Ping'an, who is Dao, the old man didn't really recognize the disciple from beginning to end. In the local area, if the disciple didn't worship the master's tea, or the master didn't drink that cup of tea, there was no master's apprentice's name. Chen Ping'an and Liu Xiaonyang were not neighbors, and their ancestral homes were far away. The reason why Liu Xiaonyang was so far away at that time I will introduce Chen Ping'an to old man Yao thought it comes from a period of old grudges. When I was a teenager, Liu Xiaonyang was once a famous naughty teenager in the town. Before his grandfather died, there was an elder at home. After his grandfather died of illness, he was as tall as a young man at the age of 12 or 13, and became the devil of the world for everyone in the neighborhood. Later, I don't know why, Liu Xiaonyang was annoyed. A group of Liu's children ended up stuck in the mud bottle lane and gave a solid beating. They were all young men in high spirits and never cared about the severity. Liu Xiaonyang quickly drew up blood. Most of the more than 10 families living in the mud bottle lane were the bottom craftsman households in Xianxia, who dared to get involved in the muddy water. At that time, Song Jixen was not afraid at all. Instead, he squatted happily on the wall to watch the excitement, for fear that the world would not be chaotic. In the end, only a skinny child sneaked out of the yard, ran to the alley, tore his heart and lungs into the street, and shouted, "Dead, dead, double quotes." Hearing the word dead man, the children of the Liu family woke up with horror. They saw Liu Xiaonyang covered with blood on the ground, and the tall young man was dying. The rich young man finally felt afraid for a while. After looking at each other, they ran away from the other end of the mud bottle lane. But after that, instead of thanking the child who saved his life, Liu Xiaonyang came here every once in a while to play tricks on the orphan. The orphan was also stubborn. No matter how Liu Xiaonyang bullied him, he refused to cry, which made the teenager more angry. But then one year, Liu Xiaonyang saw the little orphan surnamed Chen. It was estimated that he couldn't carry the winter. Finally, his conscience found that he had died. The youngsters who studied in Longyao took the orphans to the Longyao on the side of Bangxi. After leaving the town and walking west, Liu Xiaonyang still hasn't figured out how the little guy who looks like charcoal got to Longyao with his legs as thin as a bamboo pole. However, although Old Yao finally left Chen Ping'an, but there is a big difference between the two. He also beat and scolded Liu Xiaonyang, the close disciple. But the blind man also felt the good intentions. For example, he hit Liu Xiaonyang hard once, which made his forehead bleed. The young man was rough and fleshy. Instead, he was old Yao, who was a master. He regretted it very much. This old man, who was used to being dignified in front of his disciples, was in the way. Yu Mianzi couldn't say anything. As a result, he circled around his house in the middle of the night. He was still worried about Liu Xianyang. Finally, he had to call Chen Ping'an and send Liu Xianyang a bottle of ointment. Chen Ping'an has admired Liu Xianyang for so many years. I don't envy Liu Xianyang for his high talent, great strength, and good popularity. I just envy Liu Xianyang for his fearlessness. He has no heart and no lung wherever he goes, and never thinks it's a bad thing to live alone. No matter where he goes and who he gets along with, Liu Xianyang will soon be able to hook up his shoulders. Co-brothers, drink and play boxing. Liu Xianyang is very ill because his grandfather is not in good health. He became a child king by self-reliance. He was adept at catching snakes, fish and birds' nests. Liu Xianyang seemed to be able to do everything, especially catching loach and eel on the rural ridge. In fact, when Liu Xianyang dropped out of the rural school, Mr. Dache went to see Liu Xianyang for illness. Grandpa on the couch said he could not charge a penny, but Liu Xianyang refused. He said he just wanted to earn money and didn't want to study. Mr. Dache said he could pay Liu Yangxian to be his schoolboy. Liu Xianyang still refused to. No doubt. In fact, Liu Xianyang lived very well. Even if old man Yao died and the dragon kill was banned, he was attracted by the blacksmith in Qilongling and opened in the south of the town. A few days later, he began to build huts and stoves and was very busy. Liu Xianyang watched Chen Ping'an blow out the candle, put it on the table, and asked in a low voice, "Have you ever heard strange sounds in the morning, like ... Chen Ping'an sat on the bench, waiting for the following. Liu Xianyang hesitated for a moment, blushing slightly for the first time, just like a cat barking in spring. Chen Ping'an asked, "Is Song Jixin learning cat barking or childish gooey?" Liu Xianyang turned his eyes and stopped playing the piano to an ox. He put his hands on the bedboard, slowly bent his elbows, then straightened his arms, left his eyes off the bedboard and his feet off the ground. His eyes hung in the air and sneered. What Zigui is clearly called Wang Zhu. Song likes to show off when he was a child. He doesn't know where to see the word Zigui and uses it indiscriminately. He doesn't care whether the meaning of the two words is good or not. Such a child on Wang Zhu's stall really did evil in his previous life. Otherwise he won't come to Song Jixin to suffer. Chen Ping'an didn't agree with the tall boy. Liu Xianyang, who kept that posture all the time, snorted coldly. "You really don't understand. Why did you help Wang Zhu carry the bagger once, and then she won't talk to you again? It must be Song Jixin's small-bellied chicken. If she knocked over the vinegar bottle, she threatened Wang Zhu not to flirt with you, or she would have to be served by family law, not only breaking her leg, but also throwing it into the mud bottle alley. Chen Ping'an really couldn't listen anymore and interrupted Liu Xianyang's words. "Song Jixin is no bad for her," Liu Xianyang said angrily. "Do you know what's good and what's bad?" Chen Ping'an's eyes were clear, and she whispered, "Sometimes she works in the yard. Song Jixin occasionally sits on the bench and looks at his local county chronicles. When she looks at Song Jixin, she often smiles." Liu Xianyang's eyes were dull. Suddenly, the thin wooden bed couldn't support Liu Xianyang's weight. From interruption to half, the tall boy sat on the ground. Chen Ping'an squatted on the ground, holding his head with both hands, sighed and had a headache. Liu Xianyang scratched his head and stood up without saying anything guilty. He just kicked Chen Ping'an gently and said with a grin, "You okay? It's just a small broken bed. I'm here today to bring you great news." "How can it be worth more than your broken bed?" Chen Ping'an raised his head. Liu Xianyang said triumphantly, "After my master Ruan left the town, he suddenly said to dig some wells by the stream in the south. Originally, there were not enough hands, and I needed to call for help. I casually mentioned you that there was a short white gourd with good strength. Master Ruan also promised to let you go by yourself in the next 2 days." Chen Ping'an suddenly got up and was about to say thanks. Liu Xianyang raised a palm. "Stop. Stop. Don't thank you. Just keep it in mind." Chen Ping'an bared his teeth. Liu Xianyang looked around. A fishing rod was placed obliquely in the corner of the wall. A pair of slingshots lay in the window. A wooden bowl was hung on the wall. The tall boy wanted to talk and stopped. Finally, he held back and didn't speak. He strode across the threshold, his boot clearly deliberately bypassing the ashes of the runes. Chen Ping'an looked at the tall figure. Liu Xiaonyang suddenly turned around and faced Chen Ping'an in the threshold. The tall boy sat down with his feet on the ground. After several steps, he punched heavily, then closed his fist and straightened his waist. He laughed loudly. Master Rowan told me privately that I can kill people if I only need to practice this boxing for 1 year. Liu Xiaonyang seemed to feel still not satisfied. He made a strange kick and said with a smile, "This good leg must go into the crotch and kick the donkey to death." Finally, Liu Xiaonyang held out his thumb, pointed to his chest, and said angrily, "When Master Rowan taught me boxing, I had some ideas and experiences, so I gossip with him. For example, my understanding of old men, Yao's unique porcelain-making skill jump knife, and Master Rowan praised me as a once-in-a-century martial arts wizard. In the future, just follow me and you'll be popular and spicy." Liu Xiaonyang caught a glimpse from the corner of his eye that the servant girl next door had entered the room, and suddenly lost interest in playing a hero. He said casually to Chen Ping'an, "By the way, when I passed the old locust tree, there was an old man who called himself a storyteller over there. He was playing with a stall there and said that he had accumulated a lot of strange people and interesting things. He wanted to talk to us. You can have a look when you are free." Chen Ping'an nodded. Liu Xiaonyang left the mud bottle lane with great strides. There are many stories about this rebellious young man who lives alone in the town. But the young man likes to claim that his ancestors are generals who lead soldiers to war. So his family has that treasure armor passed down from generation to generation. It's Beijing. Chen Ping'an saw at once with his own eyes. In fact, it looks ugly. It's like a wart on a person and a scar on an old tree. However, Liu Xiaonyang's peers don't say so. They only say that Liu Xiaonyang's grandparents were deserters. They fled to the town and became a door-to-door son-in-law. They were lucky to escape the government's pursuit. It's as if he had seen how Liu Xiaonyang's grandparents fled the battlefield, and how they drifted all the way to this small town. Chen Ping'an thought for a moment, squatting next to the threshold and blowing away the ashes. Song Jigsun didn't know when to stand on the side of the courtyard wall, followed by his mate Jigui. He shouted, "Do you want to play with us over the locust tree?" Chen Ping'an raised his head. "No." Song Jigsun pulled the corners of his mouth. "It's boring." He turned to his servant girl and said with a smile, "Jigui, let's go. Go on, buy you a whole jar of peach blossom powder in the general's stomach," she said shyly. "A small cricket can ease enough." Song Jigsun, with his head held high, strode forward. "My Song family, Zhang Mingdingshi, has been wearing tassels for generations. How can we be petty? Isn't it humiliating to the family style?" Chen Ping'an sat on the threshold and rubbed his forehead. In fact, when Song Jigsun didn't say those strange words and nonsense, it didn't feel bad. But if Liu Xiaonyang was present at this time, he would say that he wanted to knock on the back of Song Jigsun's head. Chen Ping'an leaned against the door and thought about tomorrow. Most of them would be like today, and the day after tomorrow would be like tomorrow. So he would go on like this all his life until he was almost like old man Yao. Man eats earth all his life, and earth eats man once. Finally, close your eyes and open them again, which may be the next life. The boy looked down at the straw sandals on his feet, and suddenly laughed. Stepping on a bluestone board is different from stepping on a muddy beach. When Liu Xiaonyang left the alley and passed the fortune teller's store, the young Taoist admitted, "Come on. I see you look like cooking oil. It's not a good omen, but don't be afraid. I have a way to help you eliminate disasters." Double quotes. Liu Xiaonyang was a little surprised. He remembered that the Taoist priest had given people a fortune teller before, but he really didn't take the initiative to solicit business. Almost all of them belong to volunteers. Now that the Dragon Kill is closed by the imperial government, the Taoist priest will be unlucky and will not be able to open the pot. So he would rather kill by mistake than put it by mistake. Liu Xiaonyang said with a smile, "Your way is to spend money to eliminate disasters, right?" Get out of your uncle. You want to cheat money from me? Let's go to the next life. The young Taoist was not angry and shouted to the tall young man, if you expect PepsiCo to be prosperous this year, who knows that there will be disasters in your life? If you don't want to read the models without disasters, you should burn incense. You should burn incense. Double quotes. Liu Xiaoyan turned around and ran to the fortune teller's stall. He rubbed his hands and shouted, "Burn incense, right? I'll burn your stall first." The Taoist was obviously frightened. When he got up, he couldn't care about the stall and ran away. Liu Xiaoyan stood beside the stall, looked at the embarrassed figure of the Taoist, left, caught a glimpse of the sign box on the table, pushed it down the wheel. The bamboo stick clattered out of the sign box, and finally showed a fan shape on the table. Liu Xiaoyan reached out and pointed to the Taoist, who stopped in the distance. "I'll see you again and again." The young Taoist bowed with fists and begged for mercy. Liu Xiaoyan just stopped. The young Taoist waited until the tall boy walked away before he dared to sit down again. He sighed. The world is hard. The heart is not ancient, and it is difficult for the poor to live. At this moment, the Taoist priest quickly closed his eyes and said in a loud voice, "The pond is full of frogs. Stabbing people in the stomach is the heart of the people. The reputation here is SHUISEJNG ping. It's only suitable to move everywhere." The young girls obviously heard the Taoist's words, but they didn't mean to stop. The Taoist slightly opened his eyes and saw that he was going to miss the business again. He had to slap his hands on the table and raise his voice. "The number one scholar is originally a son of the world, and the prime minister is nothing but a man in the world. Learn from heaven and man. Move the city, and be elated and energetic." Song Jixon and his maidservant Zhigui just moved on. Frustrated, the Taoist whispered, "It's impossible to live this day." Without warning, the young man turned his head, threw a copper coin at the young Taoist from a distance, smiled brightly, and said, "I borrow your good words." The Taoist hurriedly caught the copper coin, spread out his palm, and looked at it with a frown. It was the smallest penny. However, the young Taoist put the copper coin gently on the table. In the twinkling of an eye, a yellow finch fell on the table, bat its head, and pecked the copper coin gently. Then it held it in its mouth and looked up at the young Taoist. The yellow finch's eyes were as flexible as people. The Taoist whispered, "Go. It's not suitable to stay here for a long time." The yellow finch flashed away. The young Taoist looked around and finally stopped at the high memorial archway in the distance. He happened to face the full-character plaque of angry bullfighting and said with emotion, "It's a pity." Finally, the Taoist added, "If you can sell it outside, how can you have 1,800 liang of silver?" Song Jixon took his maidservant Zhigui to the old locust tree. He found that the shade was full of people. Nearly 100 people, sitting on the benches and chairs moved by their own family. One after another, there were children pulling their elders to join in the fun. Song Jixon stood side by side with her on the edge of the shade of the tree. He saw an old man standing under the tree, holding a white bowl in one hand and bearing his bag in the other. He looked excited and was shouting, "I've just talked about the general direction of the dragon vein. I'll talk about the real dragon. Tut tut. It's really amazing. About 3,000 years ago, there was a great immortal figure in the world. First, he devoted himself to practicing a blazer cave and proved the road. Then he went around the world alone with his sword. He was 3 feet tall and sharp. I don't know why he didn't deal with Jialong in the whole 300 spring and autumn period. Some dragons cut off the dragons and killed no real dragons in the world. Finally, they disappeared. Some people said that he went to the place of Zhangban, a very high Taoist drama, and sat down with the Taoist ancestors to talk about the Tao. Others said that he went to the Pure Land of Buddhism in the far west to argue with the Buddha. Others said that he personally sat at the gate of Fengdu Prefecture to prevent demons and monsters from harming the world. The old man sputtered, and all the people in the town below were indifferent, and everyone looked at a loss. The maid whispered curiously, "What is 3 feet of spirit?" Song Jixon said with a smile, "It's a sword." The maid didn't have a good way. "Young master, the old man likes to show off his knowledge and doesn't speak well." Song Jixon glanced at the old man and gloated. There are few literates in our town. The storyteller has given his eyes to the blind. The maid asked again, what is the blessed land of the cave? Is there really anyone in the world who can live 300 years and defend a prefecture, which is not a place where dead people can go? Song Jiksen was asked, but he didn't want to be timid, so he said casually, it's full of nonsense. I've probably seen several official and unofficial histories to fool the villagers. At this moment, Song Jiksen keenly found the old man and took a look at himself intentionally or unintentionally. Although it was just a dragonfly's line of sight and passed by quickly, Song Jiksen still caught it carefully. But the boy didn't care that it was just a coincidence. The maidservant looked up at the old locust tree. The broken light fell through the gaps of the leaves. She narrowed her eyes subconsciously. Song Jiksen looked around and was suddenly stunned. That now her maid has a side face that has just begun to lose baby fat. She seems to be very different from the thin and small, dry, unshriveled little servant girl in her memory that, according to the custom of the town, when a woman marries, she will hire a person with good fortune whose parents and children are alive. She will ask her to twist the hair off the bride's face and trim her forehead and sideburns, which is called opening her face or raising her eyebrows. Song Jiksen also heard from the book that there was no custom in a small town. So when Jigui was 12 years old, he bought the best new wine in the town, moved out the stolen porcelain vase, with a beautiful glaze like green plum, poured the wine into it, carefully sealed it with mud, and finally buried it in the ground. Song Jiksen suddenly said, "See Gui, although the guy's surname Chen, according to our scholars' ancestors, belongs to rotten wood can't be carved, and the wall of dirt can't be built. But anyway, he has done a meaningful thing in his life." The maid didn't answer. She frowned low, and her eyelashes trembled faintly. Song Jiksen said to himself, Chen Ping'an is not a bad person, but he is too rigid and only knows dead justice when doing anything. Therefore, becoming a kill craftsman means that no matter how hard he practices, he is doomed to be unable to do a good thing with aura. Therefore, Liu Xionyang's master, O Diao, has a unique vision of Chen Ping'an's death and life that it is called rotten wood and can't be carved. As for the wall of dung and soil, it can't be carved shy. It roughly means that a poor man like Chen Ping'an, even if you put a dragon robe on him, he is still a rustic mud-leg. Double quotes. When Song Jiksen said this, he mocked himself. I'm actually worse than Chen Ping'an. She doesn't know how to comfort her son. Song Jiksen and his handmaid, in this small town, have always been the important conversation between the rich in Fulu Street and Tawai Lane. Thanks to Song Jiksen's cheap father, Lord Song, there are no big people and no storms in the town. Therefore, the Q governor stationed here by the imperial court is undoubtedly the kind of blue sky master in the playbook. Among the dozens of governors in history, Lord Song, who was also the above governor, won the most popular support. Unlike the previous high officials, Lord Song not only did not hide in the official office, cultivate his morality and morale, but also did not he close the door to thank the guests and devoted himself to studying in the study. Instead, he was personally involved in the firing of official kill porcelain. He was more like a rural people than a craftsman and a kill worker. For more than 10 years, this bookish adult Song had his skin tanned and shiny. His usual dress was the same as that of a farmer. He traded people and had no shelf. It was a pity that the imperial porcelain fire from the dragon kill in the small town was no different. Whether it is the color of glaze or the shape of large and small pieces is always unsatisfactory. To be exact, it is even a little inferior to the previous level, which makes the old kill heads puzzled. Finally, the imperial court probably felt that the conscientious Lord Song had no credit or hard work. He transferred him back to the imperial edict of the Ministry of Officials in the capital and got a good evaluation. Before returning to Beijing, Lord Song spent all his money and invested in the construction of a corridor bridge. Later, he found that the big man Song left the motorcade and didn't take a child with him. And several big families in the town suddenly realized it can be said that Lord Song and the town have accumulated a good love of incense. With the deliberate care of the current supervisor, Young Song Jigson has lived a carefree life in the town all these years. Now she is renamed Jigui's servant girl. There are different opinions about her life history. The locals living in Naiping Lane say that it is a snowy winter, and there is a foreign girl who begged so far and fainted at the gate of Song Jigson's house. If someone hadn't found it early, he would have reincarnated in Lord Yan. The old man doing chores at the official office has another saying. He vowed that he was an orphan bought by Lord Song from other places in his early years. In order to find a person who knows his own well-being for his illegitimate son Song Jigson and make up for his father and son's lack of recognition my dad. In any case, after the maidservant was named Jigui by the teenager, the father-son relationship between the two people was completely strengthened, because the big family gentry in the small town knew that Lord Song loved one inkstone most. So the word Jigui was engraved. Song Jigson recovered and smiled brightly. I don't know why. I think of the dead four-legged snake. Jigui. If you think about it, I've fallen into Champing and S yarn that it still wants to run to our house. You say how unpopular Champing and S kennel is. So poor that even a little snake doesn't want to go in. The maid thought carefully and replied. Some things also talk about fate. Song Jigson stretched out his thumb and said happily. That's the truth. He Champing is a man with shallow fortune. If he can live, he will be satisfied. She didn't speak. Song Jigson said to himself. After we leave the town, Champing will take care of the things in the house. Will this guy steal from himself? The maid whispered. Young master, aren't you? Song Jigson said with a smile. Yo, Jigui, do you understand the meaning of self-defense? The maid blinked her long eyes. Isn't it literal? Song Jigson smiled and looked to the south, revealing a touch of yearning. I heard that there are more books in the capital than the flowers and trees in our town. At this time, the storyteller was saying, although there is no real dragon in the world, the subordination of the dragon, such as Zhao, Q, Gu, etc., is still real and living in the world, maybe ... double quotes. The old man deliberately sold it for a while, seeing that the audience were indifferent and didn't know how to support it at all. He had to continue to say, maybe it's hidden around us. The Taoist gods call it the hidden dragon in the abyss. Song Jigson yawned. A locust leaf suddenly fell from his head, green and dripping, just on the boy's forehead. Song Jigson reached out to grasp the leaves and twisted the petiole with his fingers, thinking of going to the east gate of the city to collect debts once. When he was near the old locust tree, he also saw locust leaves falling in front of him, but he accelerated his steps and wanted to reach out to catch them. It was just a breeze, and the leaf slipped by his hand. The straw sandal boy is vigorous and moves one step quickly to intercept this leaf, but the leaf spun again in the air. The boy didn't believe in evil. He tossed and moved several times. Finally, he still couldn't catch the locust leaf. Young Champing has no choice. A young man in a green shirt who played truant in a rural school passed Champing. The young man in green shirt didn't know. He didn't know when to stay a locust leaf on his shoulder. Champing continues to go to the east gate of the city. Even if he doesn't get money, it's good to urge him. Far away from the fortune-teller's store, the young Taoist closed his eyes and said to himself, who says the cycle of fortune is no dick? When Champing came to the east gate, he saw the man sitting cross-legged on the stump at the gate of the fence, lazily basking in the early spring sun, closing his eyes, humming a tune, and clapping his hands on his knees. Champing squatted beside him. It was really hard for a teenager to talk about collecting debts. The boy had to look quietly at the wide road in the east, winding and long, like a strong yellow snake. He habitually grabbed a handful of soil, held it in the palm of his hand and rubbed it slowly. He once followed old man Yao over mountains and mountains around the town, carrying a heavy bag full of various objects such as firewood, knives, and hoes. Under the leadership of the old man, he would stop and go everywhere. Champing often needed to eat soil. He grabbed a handful of soil and put it directly into his mouth to chew it and taste it carefully. Over time, practice makes perfect. Even if Champing only grinds his fingers, he knows the texture of the soil, so that later, Chen Ping'an could weigh the broken porcelain pieces at the mat of some old kins on the market and know which kill mouth will even the master burn them. Although old man Yao is eccentric and inhumane, and often beats and scolds Chen Ping'an. Once, old man Yao disliked Chen Ping'an's poor understanding and was simply an ignorant fool. In a rage, he left him in the wilderness, and the old man returned to the kill mouth alone. It was late at night when the boy walked 60 miles and approached the dragon kill. It rained heavily that day. When the boy hobbled through the mud and finally saw a little light in the distance, the stubborn boy had the impulse to cry for the first time after making a living alone. But the young never complained about the old man, let alone hated him. The young man came from a poor family and didn't read a book, but he understood a truth beyond books, that no one in the world should treat you well except parents. And his parents left early. Chen Ping'an could stand it and was in a daze. The sloppy man seemed to feel that he could not muddle through. He opened his eyes and said with a smile, "It's just 5 yuan. A man is so stingy that he won't make great achievements in the future." Chen Ping'an was helpless. "Aren't you just worrying about it?" The man grinned and showed his uneven big yellow teeth. He smiled and said, "So if you don't want to be a bachelor like me in the future, don't worry about the 5 yuan money." Chen Ping'an sighed, looked up and said seriously, "If you're short of money, forget the 5 yuan money. But it's agreed in advance that 1 letter in the future will be a copper coin, and you can't default anymore." The man with a sour smell turned his head and said with a smile, "Little guy, with your bad temper, you will easily suffer heavy losses in the future. Haven't you heard the old saying that suffering losses is a blessing? If you suffer small losses, you don't want to eat ... He glanced at the soil in the boy's hand, paused slightly and said, "It's life facing the lowest and back to the sky." Chen Ping'an retorted, "Didn't I just say that I don't want 5 yuan? Isn't it a small loss?" The man was a little shriveled and looked angry. He waved to rush people. "Go away. It's hard to chat with your boy." Chen Ping'an loosened his fingers, lost the soil, got up and said, "The tree here is damp ... The man looked up, smiled and scolded, "I still need you to teach me a lesson. Young people have strong young and can bake cakes on their hips." The man turned his head, glanced at the boy's back, croaked his mouth and muttered, as if he was scolding God, "For some reason, Mr. Dao Che, a private tutor, ended his teaching early for the first time. There is a yard behind the school. A short firewood gate opens in the north, which can lead to the bamboo forest." When Song Jigson and his maidservant were listening to the story under the old locust tree, they were called to play chess. Song Jigson was reluctant, but the man said it was Mr. QI's meaning and wanted to see if their chess power had improved. Song Jigson had a vague sense of respect and fear for the unsmiling Mr. Dao Che, so Mr. Dao Che personally made this decree. Song Jigson had to keep the appointment, but he had to wait until the storyteller finished telling the story before going to the backyard of the school. The young man in green shirt, who helped him deliver the message, had to go home first. He didn't forget to tell Song Jigson not to arrive too late. He was talkative, but he played the same old tune again. "Wait, my husband is the most disciplined and doesn't like others to break their promises," and so on. Song Jigson dug his ears and said he knew. When Song Jigson brought Jigui to the backyard of the school, the cool wind was blowing, and the gentle young man in green shirt, as usual, had sat on the stool in the south, with a straight waist and a straight mind. Song Jigson sat opposite the young man in green shirt, facing south. Mr. Dao Che sits in the west and never says a word. Every time her maidservant Jigui plays chess with others, she goes for a walk in the bamboo forest to avoid disturbing the 3 scholars. Today is no exception. There is no so-called scholarly family in a small town in a corner, so scholars are rare, according to the old rules established by Mr. Dao Che. Song Jigson and King Shirang should guess the sun and hold the black first. Song Jigson and his peers opposite him began to learn chess almost at the same time. However, Song Jigson's talent and chess power improved rapidly. Therefore, Mr. Dao Che, who was taught their chess skills, was regarded as a high-level player. When he guessed first, Song Jigson took out a white chess from the chess box, ranging in number, and kept it secret. The young man in green shirt then picked up one or two sunspots. After guessing the white chess parity, he can hold the black first, which has the advantage of first. In the first 2 years of chess, Song Jigsun did not fail either in white or black. However, Song Jigsun is not interested in playing chess. He catches fish for 3 days and basks in the net for 2 days. On the other hand, the less qualified young man in green shirt is not only a rural school student, but also a schoolboy. He gets along with Mr. Dao Che day and night. Even if he just watches Mr. Dao Che sit and play music, he also benefits a lot. Therefore, the young man in green shirt can occasionally win by chance from being a black man. Now, as long as he is a black man, the victory or defeat can be between 50 and 50 with Song Jigsun. The progress of chess strength is obvious. For this change, Mr. Dao Che did not say a word and just stood by. Just as Song Jigsun was about to catch a chess piece, Mr. Dao Che suddenly said, "Today, you'll play a chess game and hold the white first." The two teenagers were confused and didn't know what sea chess was. Mr. Dao Che spoke slowly after carefully explaining the rules. It was no cumbersome dot, he just put down the black and white suns in the 4 stars. The twists and folds of middle-aged people are skillful in movement and flow, which is pleasing to the eyes. At ordinary times, the young man in green shirt, who likes to abide by the rules most, was stunned when he heard the bad news, looked at the chessboard, and finally said carefully, "Say, it seems that many stereotypes can be used." Song Jigsun frowned and thought for a moment. Soon his eyes brightened and his eyebrows stretched out and said, "It's the smaller chessboard pattern." Then Song Jigsun asked with a smile, "Right, Mr. Dao Che?" The middle-aged Confucian nodded and said, "Indeed." Song Jigsun peeked an eyebrow at his peers opposite him, smiled and asked, "Do you want to let me play chess first? Otherwise this guy will lose." The young man in front of him suddenly blushed and muttered, because he knew that he had won more and more times. In addition to the increase in chess power, the real main reason was Song Jigsun. He was more and more absent-minded and even tired of playing chess in the past 2 years. Many winners and losers. Song Jigsun even deliberately released water. Well, after the layout of the first hand was clearly dominant, he moved to the middle set. Song Jigsun's society deliberately took risks to kill the long for playing chess. The talented Song Jigsun, whether it's fun or not, is the first choice. For the young man in green shirt, from the first time the twist fell on the chessboard, he was obsessed with the word victory and defeat. Mr. Dao Che looked at his school disciples and said, "You can take the white lead." Next, the young man in green shirt fell slowly, cautious and came step by step. Song Jigsun is still like a falling child flying, opening and closing, an antelope hanging its horn. The temperament of the two sides is very different. However, with more than 80 hands, the young man in green shirt lost in a mess. He hung his head and didn't speak, tightly pursed his lips. Song Jigsun put his elbow on the table, held his cheek, twisted his fingers with one hand, gently knocked on the stone table and stared at the chess game. According to Mr. Dao Che single quotes as rules, when the two sides play chess, they can silently admit defeat. It is absolutely impossible to say "I lost." No matter how unwilling the young man in green shirt is, he still throws his son slowly. Mr. Dao Che said to his disciples, "Practice calligraphy. You don't have to pick up the pieces and write 300 words of forever." The young man in green got up quickly and bowed respectfully to leave. Song Jigsun disappeared in the young man's figure and asked softly, "Say, are you leaving here?" The refined scholar with frosty white temples nodded and said, "Within 10 days, he will leave." Song Jigsun said with a smile, "That's just right. I can see my husband off." The teacher hesitated for a moment and finally said, "There's no need to see me off. Song Jigsun, remember not to make too much publicity when you go outside the town in the future. I have nothing else. 3 elementary school books, primary school, rights and music, and Guanzi. You can take them together and review them frequently. You need to know how to read hundreds of times, and its meaning is self-evident. If you can read more than 10,000 volumes, it's even more important to write. If you have a God, you will know the true meaning here. You will naturally know in the future." As for the 3 miscellaneous books, you might as well read them in your spare time, or you can cultivate your feelings. Xianxia was surprised and embarrassed. He boldly said, "So, it's like supporting the orphan, which makes me uncomfortable." Mr. Dao smiled and said softly, "It's not as exaggerated as you said. Where don't we meet in life? We'll meet again one day." When this gentleman smiles, he makes people feel like spring breeze. He suddenly said, "Go to Zhao Yu and say goodbye in advance." Xianxia got up and said with a smile, "You okay? Please tidy up the chess game." The boy ran away happily. The middle-aged Confucian scholar leaned down to pick up the pieces, though it seemed that one piece in the east and one piece in the west were in disorder. In fact, it was black first and then white. He picked up the sunspot that fell last in Xianxia and pushed it backwards in order. I don't know when the magic way has turned back from the bamboo forest. She just stands outside the firewall gate and doesn't set foot in the yard. Without turning his head, he said in a deep voice, "Take care of yourself." The girl who grew up in the mud bottle lane looked ignorant, soft, weak, timid, and pitiful. The gentle Confucian scholar showed a faint angry look and slowly turned his head to look at the dark cold eyes. The girl is still confused or innocent. The middle-aged scholar stood up, looked at the girl, and said with a sneer, "Evil and evil seed." The girl slowly converged on the innocent look on her face. Her eyes became cold, and a sarcastic smile hung from the corners of her mouth. She seems to be saying, "What can you do to me?" She just looked at the Confucians. Inside and outside the courtyard, there seemed to be a pair of pythons confronting each other. Between the two, they hate each other. In the distance, Xianxia shouted, "Ji Gui, go home." The girl immediately stood on tiptoe and replied, "Hey, you okay, child?" She pushed open the firewall door and trotted past the teacher. After running a few steps, she didn't forget to turn around and give a blessing to the figure. Her voice was gentle and pleasant. "Say, Ji Gui left first, after a long time." The Confucian sighed. The spring breeze is warm and the bamboo leaves are swaying. Like the sound of turning books, the young Taoist wearing a lotus corolla cleaned up his stall and sighed. When the familiar people in the town asked why, they just shook their heads and didn't answer. The last newly married woman who used to be married here passed by and saw the young Taoist so abnormal, shy, and astringent. She stopped with a soft, waxy voice and asked questions. Her talking eyes lingered on the young Taoist's handsome face. The young Taoist glanced at the woman quietly. His vision was slightly downward, though it was a bulging landscape. Then the Taoist swallowed his saliva and said a divine divination. "Today, I've calculated a sign for myself that it's fierce.